Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us for today's Small Business Boot Camp. I'm Robert Theobald, Small Business Ombudsman and Vice President of Small Business Services here at the Arizona Commerce Authority. I want to welcome you and thank you for joining us today. And as we like to do, please go to the chat function and post in the chat where you are tuning in from. We like to see where from throughout the state and sometimes beyond the state we have our participants joining us from. So post that up. I see we've got Jennifer from Maricopa. We have Gilbert, Anthem, Mesa, Goodyear, Tempe, Peoria, more Mesa, more Tempe, another Gilbert, Tucson, Phoenix, downtown Phoenix. Again, if you just joined, please post up in the chat where you're tuning in from. We like to see where we have that. I've got Scottsdale, Chandler, Lake Powell. All right. Thank you, Deborah, for joining us from up north. Excellent. Well, thank you for posting that in there. We like to see, again, where everybody's tuning in from. And to start, if you're new to the Small Business Boot Camp, we can't do these without our community partners. We appreciate them for all their time, their effort, and their expertise that they share with us and give back to the community to help support small businesses. Also, the Small Business Boot Camp is designed to help small businesses prepare, plan, and grow. And we do that in multiple ways. Our main way is these Tuesday morning workshops, webinars, the Small Business Boot Camp. But we also do some hands-on in-person workshops. We also do virtual workshops and lunch and learns as well. We just recently had a lunch and learn on trademarks. And the great thing with those being virtual is you can find them in our content library. So if you missed the lunch and learn on trademarks, you can go in our content library and find that session and hear what the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office shared about trademarks and how to do that, how to process them and get your brand or your items trademarked. So the content library has well over 350 at this point recorded webinars and workshops, and we include the presentation slide decks and also other materials at times if our presenters have other materials they want to share. It's a great resource and there's no cost to access it. You can find it at the bottom of the bootcamp webpage. So it's a great resource for everybody. The ACA also has a number of other programs to help support small businesses. You can find these plus more at azcommerce.com/programs. One of the programs we like to talk about a lot is our small business checklist. This is a premier tool to help businesses understand the commonly requested licensing, registration, and compliance requirements at the local, state, and federal levels. There's also a lot of other great small business information for those looking to start a business or expand a business. You can scan that QR code. It'll take you to the web page. And we have two options to help you find the information. We have the detailed checklist, and then we also have Sally, our state and local licensing information virtual assistant. And feel free to talk to Sally, do the chat there, and provide feedback. If Sally doesn't give you a good answer, please let us know. Sally is constantly learning, and we like to make any updates we need to make the best product available to you. So this is a great resource. Check it out. So with that, we're going to look at our upcoming sessions. After today, next week, we will not have a boot camp session because of the Thanksgiving holiday. And we'll come back after Thanksgiving for December 3rd and December 10th. And then that will wrap us up for 2024. And then we will kick back off on January 7th with a whole new lineup with some new presenters. We're very excited about what we have scheduled through the end of the year and through the first part of 2025. So those are great upcoming sessions. With that, we're going to jump into today's session. Today, we've got our program manager, Albert Escobedo. He runs the SSBCI, the State Small Business Credit Initiative Technical Assistance Program for the Arizona Commerce Authority. and has been working with a lot of lenders on these programs. And we're excited to have him with us today to talk about funding your business and more. So Albert, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and turn the time over to you. And we ask that we hope you have questions, and we want you to post those in the Q&A at the bottom of your screen, so we can use the chat for other interactions and not lose those questions in the chat. So again, questions in the Q&A at the bottom of your screen. Albert, it's all yours.
Awesome, Robert. Thank you. Thank you, Faith, also for having me here. I know that's kind of weird thanking you because we're on the same team, but still, it's great to be on here and be able to share with everyone here. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. All right. So it's good to see everyone out here today. I'll talk a little bit about myself, my position here at the ACA, and then we will get into everybody's favorite topic. Funding seems to be the hot topic here, especially with business owners. As a former one, I know how important funding is and how you need it to continue operations and how you need it to start as well. So for those of you that are advanced business owners, and for those of you that maybe just have an idea, I'm going to speak to all of that here today, and I'd love to take all of those questions as well, that you may have during the session. As far as a reiteration of questions, please make sure you put those in the Q&A, and then any responses to questions I ask in the chat. So let's go ahead and get started. A little bit about me. I run the State Small Business Credit Initiative Technical Assistance Program here at the ACA. So really long job title, seems really sophisticated. It's not. I just help support programs that assist entrepreneurs that are looking for securing funding, whether that's debt or equity funding. We come up with innovative ways in order to support our entrepreneurs through our technical assistance program. I'll talk a little bit about what that TA program looks like about 3/4 away into my presentation. So if you have any questions on that, I could give you my contact information and we can kind of go from there towards the end. I also support small business in general. So if you've called into the ACA with the questions, sometimes you get my colleague Lori, sometimes you get Faith, Robert, or sometimes you've talked to me as well. So we act as the conduit for small business resources because you don't realize how many resources there are available. People just aren't aware of them. And they said, well, Albert, I understand I have to pay for services. No, you don't in this case. A lot of these services that we offer to clients are at no cost and they could be utilized rather quickly. So when I'm not doing technical assistance management and thinking of those new ways to help support businesses for funding, I am that conduit for small businesses. All right. So some learning targets for today. Now that you're sitting here, wherever you're at or you're tuning in from, what we're going to go over is obviously the different types of funding, the honesty of funding, which is an interesting one and sometimes sticks out like what does that mean? But we'll get into that as we go into the PowerPoint. Funding that could be applicable to you in your situation. Now I'm talking in a general sense. I can't tell you exactly what your business needs right now at this very moment, but I can get you pretty close and we can talk about what that looks like. And then how to take the next steps on the right pathway to funding. That's going to be geared towards more of the businesses that are ready and that meet most of the criteria that lenders are looking for and what those next steps are. So let's warm up here in the chat a little bit. For newly founded businesses, where does the funding generally come from? I want to see your answer in the chat. Where does the funding come for new businesses? Where do we think that comes from? I'll give you about 30 seconds to answer in the chat. You could put those in the chat, not Q&A. Awesome. So personal funds, personal savings, self-funding, friends and family, bootstrapping it, right, which is supporting yourself, personal funding, grants, home equity lines of credit, right, which comes from the homeowner. So as we're looking in the chat, we're seeing all different types of funding, and I think we're seeing a higher percentage of self-funding. of maybe savings, 401ks, things of that nature. We will get into where typically most funding for businesses start up from. And I also do see some interesting ones, such as VC funding, which we will talk a little bit about today, and also loans as well. We think of banks and credit unions and the ability to give us startup funds. We'll cover that as well today. Excellent job, everyone. Thank you for responding in the chat. All right, so let's get into very basic funding types. And we saw in the chat just a couple seconds ago the two different types of that. We have on your left side of your screen, you'll have debt lending, which is your typical loan, right? You go in, you have a set amount of terms, and you pay that off per month. You could pay off early. There could be prepayment penalties, a lot of different things on the debt lending side, but typically those are just going to be your loans. Now, what type of business do we typically see go towards debt lending and generally fit in these categories? And I say generally because, again, not every single business is going to fit in that pocket, that bubble, but most will that have these attributes. So typically with debt lending, you're going to see a steady growth business. I'm going to use my former business as a great example as a former personal trainer. Okay, that steady growth, I know I'm going to have once I get going. At the time, I maybe had 10 clients a week, and I knew how many sessions more or less I was going to have per month. I could safely predict where I was going to be in 6 months or 8 months financially because my growth was pretty steady. Maybe I had a client added, a client fall off. It was all the same thing. I'm generally going to be in that same bubble, right? Personal training is also not a new idea, right? It's been around for a long time, and a lot of people do it. There's not very much innovation behind your typical personal trainer, right? Not to put myself down, but got to be real. Not much variability there at times. Typically, a lot of debt lending companies are going to be brick and mortars. So I did not have a physical location. I worked at multiple physical locations, but brick and mortars are also that as well. As far as capital being repaid, we talk about terms with debt lending. That would be something that I would take on as a personal training business in order to purchase maybe more equipment or purchase into a location. And when you look at debt lending, you're looking at companies that want to retain ownership of their business. If I take out a loan, once I pay off that loan to that institution, we shake hands, we're free and clear. I don't owe anything to them. They don't owe anything to me. I've already paid my debt to them, right? Now we look over to the venture capital side, which is a little bit more elusive, not as straightforward as people would like it to be. And we have to be honest about that. Venture capital is definitely a lot harder to acquire. And it's a lot more elusive on how companies and businesses get there. Now, in small business, we typically deal with brick and mortar, so we're going to be more on the debt lending experience side. But we do have departments here at the ACA that I can refer you to get integrated in that venture capital piece that we can discuss offline. But when we look at a venture capital company, they're highly scalable, right? So this usually is very close to high tech, innovative, novel ideas, right? We talk about me being a personal trainer. It's fun, but it's not innovative. It's not new, right? I'm doing what a lot of other people are doing. When we look at a venture capital company that's looking for investment, they have something that maybe the world has not seen before. They have a new piece of tech that is not in industry yet. So that's what we discuss when we talk about tech sector and being innovative. And if you only own one thing of the entire world when you're talking about a business, that could be very attractive. It could be something that everybody's only coming to you for. They can't go and source that anywhere else, right? We look at the personal training example. There are a lot of them out there. When you have something that is very innovative and new, there's only one place you can go. And that makes things very scalable as well. Bigger applications and owners give up partial ownership when you go down the venture capital road. That's the main contrast from debt lending. When you pay off your loan, you're done. You move forward. You don't have that communication, that contact with the institution anymore unless you get involved with them financially again. Venture capital is different. You could also lose control of what you have as well, if depending on what the percentages of ownership are. So we have some examples here of some businesses that would seek debt lending and venture. And we have some former or some current businesses as well. I'm spending so much time on this slide because a lot of businesses get a little confused when they seek lending. A lot of people want to go down the venture capital side that may be a brick and mortar and have steady growth. So they don't really fit those parameters. So one of the good things to really try to iron out is what side you fall on. Now that we went over this a little bit in the chat, I'd like for you to say, I would follow the debt lending path. You can just say debt or venture in the chat. Which do you think your business falls on for investment or loans? Is it on the debt side or is it on the venture side now that we've kind of looked a little bit? It really gets me excited to see we have 16 responses already. I love the engagement. As a former teacher, I didn't always get that engagement when I asked students to respond. Oftentimes it was like talking to a wall. So thank you, everybody. This makes me super happy that I see this. All right, we got a lot of debt side, a lot of description, a little bit of venture in there. I love it. And as we talk a little bit further in this presentation, you're going to see where the split off is and what's necessary for you to take the next steps on the debt side and then on the venture side. And yes, we will cover grants as well here in a couple of slides. And yes, and I like what Laura said. You're going to have opportunities where you're going to have to sit down with someone and determine maybe you're on the fence about which is which. And that's definitely possible. It's not huge. We don't see that a lot, but it is possible. So let's look at the new funding continuum here. On the left side of the screen, we have the most likely to secure, and I don't like to use the word easiest, but that's kind of where we're at, is it easier to secure, and then the least likely to secure at the bottom. Now, you can see personal savings, 401k, friends and family is at the top. When we talk about personal savings and 401ks, you talk about Roth IRAs, you look at accounts that are what we call liquid. You could pull that money out quick and you can utilize it, let's say, in a new business venture, right? So that is readily available money that you can utilize to start your business front side. As you look into debt lending, it's starting to come down that continuum. It becomes a little bit more difficult to secure. And in the next few slides, I'll give you some parameters of what you're looking for before you walk into a lender, because we know generally what they're looking for. And this is why it's a little bit lower on that continuum of ease to secure funding. Then at the very bottom, you look at venture capital, which is your investment, your equity injection into a business, where you give up partial ownership, and that's going to be very difficult. We won't touch too much on venture here, but it's one of those things where it takes a very long time. It's not as easy as the TV show we think it is, like on Shark Tank, which we get a lot of clients that think it's that way, but it's a lot more inclusive than that. So most of you answered on the webinar if you fell on the debt side or the venture side, and we had, I would say, probably an 80% debt, 20% venture, maybe a little bit less on that. But regardless of what path you take, you need to make a plan. Okay, there's no escaping that. If you're on the venture side, and I know we had a client here on the bubble of venture side, you're probably going to need a plan on steroids. Okay, projections that may be 3-year, 6-year projection. You're going to need to be a lot more descriptive on that venture side. Debt side, you're also going to need a plan as well, and we'll talk a little bit about what that looks like. It's your typical business plan, and it really helps detail your company's mission, aim, product, problem, solution, and more. For those that are out looking for, I wouldn't say an investment, but you're going towards the debt lending side, there's 2 frustrations you may face, and I just want to be, again, this is part of being honest of lending here. Not every lender you walk into is going to care to see your business plan. Now, that's not a reason to not do one. Okay, there are a lot of smaller lenders, a lot of smaller institutions that will, and I'd rather have you prepared with something than not. The business plan is not just for lending, but it's for creating a roadmap for your business and seeing if what you're writing down, what you're trying to show other people, even makes sense to you. Okay. Now, a little bit of a personal piece myself. As a personal trainer, I took my operations mobile It was a success. The first time I wrote up another business plan to do it, and it didn't make any sense at all. There was no pathway to profitability. It was going to cost me way more than I wanted to for it to start, amongst other problems that I needed to secure as far as getting insured for certain things that nobody would insure me for. So these are all steps that you need to outline in a business plan to see if you can even convince yourself if it's viable before you want to take the next step. Okay. Now, for those of you, we get a lot of hesitation when we get people calling in and we tell them, hey, you need to complete a business plan, which is not necessarily an easy thing to do. This is not a napkin at the bar that you can draw a plan on and somebody's going to want to see. This is something that's a lot more serious, right? So for those that have hesitation on that, I just want to leave you with this. Just pick a member of your family. And if they came up to you and asked you for $10,000 because they had the $1 million idea, would you give it to them without a plan? You should know my answer on that. It's going to be a no, right? So sometimes we have to put the shoe on the other foot and kind of ask ourselves, hey, is this something that I would engage in if I didn't see a plan? Probably not. So the lender wouldn't as well when we talk about debt lending, even venture side as well, right? You have to make sure that you are describing that in a way appropriate to your audience. And we'll get on resources here on that here soon. Albert, you used the word free in the beginning of the presentation and you haven't mentioned anything about it since. Well, here we are talking about some free resources to start your plan. Now, this is going to cater more towards the businesses that either don't have a business plan or still in what we call ideation phase. So you're still gathering information about the business you want to start, about the plan you're looking on starting, and you kind of don't know where to go. Do I call Albert? He seems nice. Do I call the ACA? They seem like they know what they're doing. But what we're going to do is give you resources here that are going to help you at least get started. And we have a lot of free resources, such as the Small Business Development Center. They offer free one-on-one counseling for things just like a business plan. Greater Phoenix Score has mentors, industry-specific mentors that can help you out on what you're looking at developing as far as a business plan. We have some self-guided resources as well that we promote at the ACA, our BBB Blueprint. Our partners down at the BBB have a self-guided, pretty intensive business plan software that they utilize that you can go through all at no cost as well. And that's going to be just preliminary, laying the foundation of your business, because as we've talked about, asking for money is one thing, but having a plan to ask for that money is a whole different ballgame that we want to make sure that we cover here today. We also have Prestamos Women's Business Center that also offer technical assistance as well for creating business plans. Let me see. Okay. All right, so we're going to lean more on the debt side of things. As I've talked about that here at the ACA, we see a lot of businesses here in our department that are seeking more of the lending, grant types of funding. We'll talk about grants here in the next couple of slides. But one of the questions we often get from our clients is, what does the debt lending timeline look like? Because we feel like it's this taboo to talk about how long something like this takes, and it shouldn't be. So year zero, you start off with your business idea, and this is right where your business plan gets started. I know we have a few newer businesses here on the call. This is a great opportunity for you to secure software that helps you track your financials. And that's going to be very important for when you start to prepare for funding, because no matter how compelling your story is, if you don't have numbers to back that up when you go into the lender, such as your financial statements, your P&Ls, your balance sheets for assets, that's going to be a huge issue. That's going to be a huge hill to overcome, and that's where we see a lot of our clients get discouraged. So year zero, your business idea is going to be where you're going to start. Then you look at how you're going to fund your business, and typically we're going to see 401k, savings, family, and friends. Now, Albert, I heard there's startup funds out there. Please tell me more about that. All right, let's talk a little bit about startup funds for companies that are in about half a year in, or maybe under a year. They are out there. We do have lenders that will provide startup funding. but it is very hard to secure because you don't have any past financials. So a lot of the financials that lenders are going to look at are your personal financials. They're also going to require personal guarantees. In a lot of cases, they will, not just here. So essentially, what that means is you're personally guaranteeing that you're going to take care of this loan, right? When we talk about collateral, we see a lot of homes being put up when we talk about startup funds, a lot of personal assets, and that shies a lot of people away. So again, the question is, are there funds for startups out there? Absolutely. But you're going to have to come to the table with a lot because you don't have those past financials. Okay, that's going to be something really big to understand.
Hey, Albert, to tie into that, when you asked about what kind of financing for your business, someone posted in the chat HELOC, home
Mhm.
equity line of credit, and that's one of those lending options for that early stage of your business.
Yeah, home equity lines of credit, we definitely, that would be thrown into that mix as well. And again, that even things like that can be a little bit daunting, especially repayment terms for people, and that's what kind of gets them a little bit backed off from going through with something like that. Let me take a look at our Q&A. Okay, perfect. We're doing good. I'll make sure I answer those questions. So years 1 through 3, you start your business, whether that's selling a product or a service, and make sure you financially track along the way. That's one of the biggest things here that we see with clients that have existing businesses. So those of you that are on the call that, Albert, I'm not a new business. I'm 2 years in, I'm 3 years in, I'm 10 years in. I want to hear about that. Make sure you're financially tracking what you have and you're working. If you have a CPA, some companies have them on retainer, some have them, a pay per service, that you have a financial plan in the future, and you ask your CPA, your accounting professional, if you're even able to take on the amount of money that you're requesting. Don't wait to ask the lender, and we'll talk a little bit about that. You want to make sure that's front side before you take a step into any lending institution. You want to make sure that you are financially tracking your business and what's being sold, what's being expended for, because that's going to be asked for when you walk into any lender, right? In your financial statements. Past that 1 to 3 years, typically at 2 years, that's when we kind of see a lot of businesses start to emerge and want to scale and have the past financial backing in order to request lending. And that's where we're able to offer a different type of technical assistance here at the ACA that can help you prepare what you need to in order to get to the funding finish line and actually secure some funding. All right. So the big thing is, what do lenders look for, right? Well, we've taken some of the lenders that we work with for one of our programs that I'll be mentioning here, and we've kind of consolidated what they generally look for. So please don't take this as I'm walking into Chase Bank and this is exactly what they're going to ask for, because that's what Albert said. He was very convincing, and this is what I have, right? Every bank, every institution may have a little bit different guidelines of what they're looking for. So please keep that in mind. But generally, they're looking for businesses that have been running for 2 years. Now, the caveat on that is actually in business, conducting business for 2 years, able to produce 2 years of financials for that business. Some of us can go down to the Arizona Corporation Commission right now and form an LLC and just have it sit there, right? And we're in business for 2 years. It's not like this doesn't work like that. Make sure you are having active business for 2 years. You have your financials. That's what they're going to request at minimum when you walk into a lending institution. They want to know how much capital clients need. That's going to be part of your business plan. Any lender we've ever talked with, and then I know Robert will confirm this, don't walk in their office asking them, how much money should my business take out? It's a huge red flag that waves out to them. You want to be prepared walking into that office on what the capital request is, what it's going to be used for, and how it's going to help scale your business. And that's something that can 100% be explained in a full blown business plan, right? Obviously, what the capital is going to be used for. You're going to need your cash flows, so your financial statements as well. That's going to need to be also verified as you go in. You can't just say, hey, we did really well last year. We netted $200,000. They're not going to take your word for it. You have to have financial statements to produce those answers and verify those answers. If you're a startup, right, and this is very typical in venture capital, you're not going to have that past financial statement. You're not going to have that past performance. So that's why your business plan and your projections are going to be very strong, and also your idea as well that you have within that business plan. Collateral is also a huge barrier to a lot of businesses, old and young. Nobody likes to put up their house or their vehicle or the baking machine that they have for their pizza business, but we've seen it all, right? The lender wants to de-risk their loan, or de-risk the loan that they give. So let's say you need $100,000. Well, they need a full collateralization for that $100,000. Well, how do they get that, right? They're going to look at maybe some business assets, some personal assets, and again, every lender is going to be different, and they'll look at that on a case by case basis. Credit score, I don't want to undersell that. That's a huge thing, right? You have revolving credit, you have payments on time, you have a mix of credit. All that is very important to lenders. But for those of you that have I wouldn't say a below average, but not the best credit score, maybe a little lower than a sub 700, don't let that shy you away and not walk in to talk to a lender. Because if you can paint the picture for a lender as to why that credit score is like that or how it's on the mend, I'm not saying you can walk in and get a loan based off that explanation, but it's something that they want to know and that they can review. Okay, so again, for the credit score, it is important, but don't let that shy you away. Go ahead and still talk to someone. Say, hey, here's where my credit score is at. Here's the rationale. We've had lenders that they just want to know the story, right? It's all about their risk when they enter a loan. They just want to know that. And then obviously your financial statements that we've already covered. All right. This this is going to apply to everyone here on the call today. So this is going to gear more towards individuals from all walks of life, all business life cycle. So if you're a new business or you're an advanced business that you've been doing this for 10 years, this is going to be all applicable to you. So on the ACA, we have funding readiness resources that pair where you're at with your business life cycle to where the resources are in the industry for you. It's not a perfect system. Some people may fit in other categories, but this is generally where you're going to be looking at, right? So for newer businesses, we'll obviously be giving you opportunities for the one-on-one no-cost counseling. You'll also have access to, like we've discussed earlier, a BBB blueprint that helps you develop a business plan that allows you to go through the different steps of your business, value propositions, preparedness, branding, whatever you need, it all puts it together in that, and it helps you paint that story. As you start to become more advanced in the time of your business, different resources are starting to be offered for you to hopefully progressively prepare you for your funding piece. Those businesses that are on this call and saying, you know what, I feel like I'm 2 years plus in business. I have solid financial statements. I'm preparing for lending. I have everything I need. What do I do next? Because I've covered a lot of those that are still new for these newer businesses. Talk to someone as far as our technical assistance providers that we're able to help you with. We have a program at the ACA, that's the program that I run, that we allow for the clients to work with either a financial advisor, legal, or accounting service in order to prepare them for funding. Now, the caveat to this is you have to be actively in that process of funding. So we're looking at companies that have a couple years in, they're able to produce, financial statements. They're essentially on the fence of funding. We're just going to help push you over. Okay. This is not going to be geared towards businesses that are new and still in the ideation phase. And you're still getting a service. We would recommend you to the SBDCs or SCORE in order to start to bring together those goals, that story in a business plan. But you necessarily at the time wouldn't be ready to take the step into trying to secure for funding. But this is going to be a resource that's going to be very essential for you in any business that you're in. We'll talk a little bit about our readiness checklist here. Let me just thank you, Faith, for putting that, and Robert for putting those links in the chat. That's going to be our SSBCI webpage. So our funding readiness worksheet is also on the page that Faith and Robert put on in the chat there. So this is just a worksheet that you can print out or you can have it online, and it goes through essentially what I've talked about. So let's say, Albert, I'm ready for funding. I have everything I need. That's great. Look at the funding readiness checklist for me just to double check. Okay. This goes through credit score, years in business, how much capital are you seeking, um, how much are you grossing in income for tax last year? What will you use the funds for? Right. And that's a huge thing as well. There are some lenders that will not, they won't fund certain industries. They won't fund certain activities. But as far as I'm blanking out on the term here, but just like operating expenses month by month, some lenders will only lend out for a couple of months. So some clients that we have will want a year of operating, but most lenders will only give up to 90 days or 60 days. So again, being prepared before you walk into a lender, this is going to assist you greatly in where you're at. And let's say you don't know what the funds will be worked for. You don't know how much capital you're seeking. Well, you probably need to sit down with a one-on-one advisor to explore those options and come down to an answer before you walk into a lender. We also have your credit score could be obtained here through annualcreditreport.com. And you can also look at how to build and monitor your business credit score and or personal credit score. Those are huge things, especially for someone that's starting off new that may not have the best credit. Not looking for lending now, but I'm looking for lending in 2 years. What do I need to do in order to build up my credit so I could be prepared 2 years down the road? That's also going to be available there as well. It's just a great guide for tracking your readiness and your preparedness to meet a lender. You can also take this worksheet to a one-on-one counselor and say, hey, this is where my deficiencies are. Let's get this ready to go before I meet a lender in 6 months or a year, right? Just double check our Q&A because I'm just blowing through this presentation here today. All right. All right. Well, I take a little deep breath here and talk about our SSBCI loan guarantee program. So not to confuse anyone, but I operate the technical assistance side. I have a colleague that operates the loan guarantee program. And we're going to talk a little bit about what that is, because that's a program special to the ACA and the 3 CDFIs that we partner with through them. So this program targets our socially and economically disadvantaged individuals. Our SETI is what we call that, and our very small businesses. SETI, in order to be SETI, it's a lot of different parameters, veteran-owned, women-owned, minority-owned businesses, and even those 3 categories have some subcategories below them as well on what it means to be a SETI business. If you're a client out there that has a DBE certificate, you would be a SETI because you have to go through that disadvantaged business enterprise application, which is very similar to just being a SETI business. Very small business is going to be any business under 10 employees full time. If you have part-time employees, there's a certain ratio that you can apply to see how many technical full-time employees that you have. This program involves 3 parties, okay? It involves the client, which in this case would be you, the lender, which would be the institution that you're requesting funds from, and then the ACA, okay? So we have 3 players here in the game. Now, the silent partner in all this is the ACA, just to make that clear. So the ACA, we don't deploy loans, okay? You don't come down to Albert and show me your loan packet, okay? I don't request that. I'm not an underwriter. Neither is anyone in the ACA. What the 2 involvements are going to be with is the lender and the client, okay? So you meet your lender, you go through the lending process, and the lender says, you know what, we can't do this loan traditionally, but we may be able to do it through the loan guarantee program, okay? And well, maybe your question is, Albert, how does the lender determine that? There's a couple of factors. Could be a hindrance of credit score, could be a lack of collateral, could be a lack of time in business, right? It could be an array of those things or a mixture of those things where the lender says, we won't do this through a traditional means, but we can do it through the loan guarantee program. And what that means is the ACA, as the silent partner, once that loan is completed, the ACA says we will guarantee in the event of default 50% of that loan. And what that does in theory for the lender is it kind of makes them want to play ball a little bit more with a client that they typically wouldn't lend to. Okay. Real world example with numbers, a client seeks $100,000 from the lender. The lender is able to process the loan through the loan guarantee program. The ACA comes in and says, if this client defaults on the $100,000, we will guarantee it up to $50,000. So we would support half of that loan in the event of default. Okay, so that's how that works. Some clients read this as, hey, it's a loan guarantee program. We're guaranteed funding. That's not what that is, but I can see how that could be misconstrued that way. It's not typically for startups, doesn't mean it can't happen. And again, this incentivizes lenders to complete a loan they wouldn't normally complete. Okay. We do also have two other programs that are on the venture side. And again, I can kind of take that offline for those that want to chat a little bit about that because it's not as straightforward as this for sure. All right. Everybody's number one topic. We hear about grants all the time here at the ACA. Albert, I have a great idea. I want funding for it. Nothing wrong with that. Nothing wrong with asking about that. But this is more of what we see in the industry with grants. So grants are usually very specific and not aimed towards newer businesses. It's kind of debatable. We'll talk a little bit about that, but they require something from the businesses as well. They are very hard to secure, and grants favor the technology and innovation sector. Okay, so what does all that mean? When grants come out, they are typically to enhance something or enhance a certain program or a specific part of industry. And we see that a lot in the tech and innovation sector. What the heck does that mean, Albert? Well, we look at new innovation towards the CHIPS and Science Act, or we looked at applications from companies that could have government applications or military applications. So things that are dancing around the newer technology sector, typically what we see grants for. Okay. That doesn't mean there are not small business grants out there for newer businesses. I'm just saying it's very, very hard to secure that. We're going to really revert back when we talk to clients that are seeking grants. I'm going to use myself as an example to not, call any specific business out. But if I called in and said, hey, I want to help people lower their blood pressure by giving them personal training sessions, right? Beautiful idea. Great idea from the heart. But there's not any grants for something like that. That needs to come from what we talked about in the beginning of the session, 401k, family and friends, personal investments, right? It's going to be very hard to secure lending as a new business like that. So although they may be beautiful ideas, the grants for those ideas are very difficult to secure. There are some small business grants out there that are competition based and do give new businesses and ideas like that an opportunity, but you have 10, 15, 20,000 businesses vying and fighting for the same $50,000 of funding. So it is possible. There are those programs. Every now and then we have clients that go through different foundations or Moonshot that can give an opportunity for some small business funding, but it's few and far between and it's very competitive, right? You're going to have a lot of people applying for the same thing. Here's a local example that I want to bring up because we get asked quite a bit where I can even look at grants. There are a couple of resources, but here at the ACA, I don't have a full-blown repository of those grants. But here's a good example of one, a former grant. This renews typically every year, but right now it's considered a former grant. It's the Buckeye Catalyst Program. So through the program, property owners, businesses, and investors can qualify for up to $50,000 of reimbursable funding to support their development. So a lot of people read $50,000. I want that to start my business. This is a reimbursement program through the city of Buckeye that formerly told businesses if you are going to move into a location, let's say a building that's maybe a little dilapidated, a little bit run down, and you'd like to move in there and make renovations, we will, after the application process that you apply for, we will reimburse you up to $50,000 of the cost for you to remodel that space to kind of rejuvenate that street or that part of the city. But it's a reimbursable cost, which means if you're approved for the full amount, you would have to front $50,000 and then get reimbursed by the city of Buckeye, which is another thing we don't talk about with grants. It's not just a one way we're going to give you funds. A lot of times you have to be reimbursed for those funds as well. You do need to meet the criteria, obviously, by the city, get approved and pay for those renovations up front. And it is not free money. I had a couple of calls on this specific Catalyst program a couple months back, maybe even the beginning of this year. And it's not free money, and it is a little disappointing to tell clients that, but they can read through that and say, hey, this is something that is going to require a lot more of me, not just the free money. But again, that's just going to be our honest piece of grants. All right. I feel like I've just been talking everybody's heads off. I hope you've enjoyed the presentation. I'm not quite done yet. I'm going to take a look at our Q&A and such and talk a little bit with those here. But the least you need to know out of everything I said, funding can be daunting, but not if you prepare for it, okay? I don't care if you're a new business or you're an older business. At the end of this presentation, if you want to get a hold of me and talk to me about the resources for your applicable funding piece, let me know. Be glad to chat with you about that. Educate yourself on the different types of funding and what they require. That's huge. Lean on the professionals that can assist you, and mostly at no cost. And again, we talked about those resources. And understand that grants are amazing. Startup funding is amazing, but funding usually starts with the owner, with lending options available as you start to make that progression with and grow your business. So keep that in mind. All right. Those are some of the big keys you need to know. And it looks like Robert wants to jump in here.
Yeah,
Go
I'm going
ahead.
to share something with grants real quick. One of the things I like to share with people is if you're looking at grants, don't count on them as your source of income or your source to fund your business. Um, but if you get one, count it as extra to help your business grow and expand faster. I shared in the chat an article the Phoenix Business Journal does every month that we share in our newsletter of some of the available grants outside of grants.gov. Grants.gov is for the federal grants, but you can see most of these are competitive in nature. But it doesn't mean you can't win them. When I'm looking at one that there is one in there that targets women founders, with the top winner getting 30,000, 20,000 for second place, etc. But you can see it's competitive because they have placing with it. But if you win that, again, count as extra. And many of those are also looking for businesses that have been in business for a period of time or require some of that stuff that Albert talked about. So if you're starting a business and relying that there's going to be a grant to help you start, you need to look on grants.gov to see if there's anything there that will help you out. There's generally not grants to help you start, but there are some competitive ones out there for businesses.
Yeah, thank you for that, Robert. That is really great insight. And as I'm looking through the chat and the Q&A, start to knock out a couple of questions, if that's okay. I think we can answer most of them. I did put my email in the chat. It's also here as well. You can contact me, shoot me an email. Be glad to chat with you if needed. I think, Robert, you talked a little bit about maybe women-owned businesses or people with disabilities wanting to start businesses. Typically, when we look at what we call disadvantaged business enterprises, that certification, or we look at SETI businesses as well. A lot of that really plays into federal contracting, not necessarily an influence on grants. We don't typically see that. So what that means is when it comes to federal contracting, a certain percentage of certain contracts go to what we would call DBEs or SETI businesses, which would be women-owned, veteran-owned, things of that nature. But as far as lending, I don't want to say it's inconsequential, but it's typically not a factor when you're going through the lending process or the grant process. It's great that you're a woman-owned business and that's applicable in a lot of other ways, but lending, it's just straightforward on some of those things we talked about in the business plan. Same with veteran-owned or minority-owned. Let me see. Perfect.
We have a lot of good questions in there, so we're gonna need
Yeah, we do.
to zip through them with the time we have.
Yeah, so money management team to purchase an existing. Um, so yeah, and we have a lot of guidelines on the loan guarantee program, if that's what you're referring to the anonymous attendee for the 30-plus-year-old business. When it comes to purchasing businesses out, so let's say there's a turnkey operation, or you want to purchase an existing business, that gets a little bit tricky when it comes to goodwill and how much the lender is able to put for lending. But I would say reach out to me, to that attendee, and we can chat about that. That is a little bit harder to do. It's not as straightforward as your typical loan for a business owner, because you're trying to buy out a business. I've been a part of very little of those, so we'll talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, and that's a good one because there's different programs that can help with that. You don't personally need to be in business for 2 years, but you have to be able to show that that business is gonna be able to have the cash flow to pay the loan that you're gonna get, whatever type it is. So there are definitely some options. You can reach out to Albert or myself, and we can talk through that.
Yeah, perfect. Um,
So again, on that, the question is, any insights on funding the purchase of existing businesses that are under $300,000? You might be able to qualify, again, depending on that existing business and where they're at, you may qualify for an SBA 7A loan to help purchase that. SBA will fund the purchase of existing businesses, and you'll want to definitely chat with. That's not a problem. Go in and chat with a lender and say, hey, do you do loans that could buy a business? Some banks will, some banks won't. And so don't be upset that the lender says no, just go to a different lender. You may have to go to 4 or 5 to find one that might be interested in doing a loan for that.
it's also good to ask the why as well, especially for those that actually go through the lending process and are denied because of a host of reasons. Make sure you ask why. So if you go back to look at why and you need to work with the business counselor, you can give them reasons on what you can work on, as opposed to just saying, I got denied. That doesn't help them, doesn't help you. You need to know the why to that.
So Brian asked a question kind of about SBA loans. Go back to that lender, that branch where you applied, and ask the why. Why did you get denied that loan? To get feedback, it might be that that lender just doesn't want to do software loans.
It's possible. But yeah, that would be good to know. And I put my email in the chat so we can talk through that if there needs to be any referral to technical assistance to work through that. Alante, is that include 1099 contractors, W-2 employees? As far as hiring, which would be, I think it's called operating costs, but working capital, maybe working capital to make payroll. We've talked a little bit about that. Most lenders, I don't think, go over 90 days of working capital, but that's usually the harder lending to secure. It is possible, but you're not going to typically see like a year of that. And I hope I'm answering your question correctly. That
I think you may have also put that in there when you talk about VSBs. And one thing to remember, a 1099 contractor is not an
Oh,
employee. And if you
that's what.
treat them as an employee, you may get yourself in trouble because they should be at that point be a W-2. So
Yes.
if you're doing a lot of 1099 work that could be considered an employee, you might be using the wrong method of paying that person.
Yeah, they're
And banks will actually identify that. They'll question that.
yeah. Yeah, the IRS has a pretty good article on the difference between contractors and employees. They're pretty specific language on there, so I'd make sure you take a look at that. Thanks, Robert, for that. I just blast through it. I didn't know that that's when the question came up. Active disability business development programs, kind of the same thing. Every grant is different. They could be asking for different parameters or looking for specific populations. I'm not familiar with any, but I'm not saying there are not out there. So look at the cities, look at grant websites that post new grants. And if there are, great, look at them, see if you can meet those requirements, but you're going to have a lot of others that are also looking at the same grant as well. It's to Jeff. Jeff S. Jeff H. How do lenders look at recapitalizations? Steal 100% equity to start to prove the business model, but not want to go 70-30. So it seems like that maybe that might be a back and forth on how much the business owner is willing to give up in a process like that. I'd say I don't want to say I can help out on determining that at all, but we can still chat a little bit about having someone look at that has that experience industry wise for that. I don't want to talk about something that I'm not too familiar with in that sense. But we'll touch base. Please send me an email, Jeff H. Hole.
So Irene asked about software recommendations.
Yeah.
A lot of people use QuickBooks, but there are some no-cost versions out there. We actually have a boot camp we did a few years ago that is still valid today that goes through some of the no-cost accounting software programs. And so you can go to the content library and search there for it under, I think, the accounting tab option. That'll help you find that previous one.
Yeah, and we can definitely help you out with that. I would suggest QuickBooks. Please do not handwrite things. We've talked to our CPA firm on that for other programs. So like, please actually put it in a software that helps businesses out so much. It eases that when they go through it. I'm sorry, Jeff S, maybe DSVR. I'm not sure. I don't know if Robert, you can help me out on what that question may be.
For the disability, it might be Department of Economic Security or the VA might have some programs to help with disability-based grants. If you're a veteran, there's the Veteran Business Outreach Center that does one-on-one counseling as well for veteran businesses. There was a question George posted in the chat. We have time real quick. We'll answer this. It says, what is the best avenue to secure a ground up construction loan and add a building to my business? The SBA does do construction loans. They're called a 504 loan. And they can be up to 25 or 30 years. And so you'll want to talk to a lender that maybe will do that, or you might be able to just get a regular real estate construction loan. Would be an option there. Again, they're going to look at your business financials. They're going to look at your cash flow and your projections. You're definitely going to want to have a business plan showing how adding that building, what it's going to do, how it's going to drive your sales, and so forth. So those would be some options. Again, I would, as Albert mentioned, there's a lot of resources, the Small Business Development Center, SCORE, Women's Business Center, VBOC, Better Business Bureau, Local First, and others that can help with some of that technical assistance or finding a lender that's right for your type of business. Also, just a quick note, I noticed some people left contact information in the chat. If you need to talk to us, please email Albert. He put his email in the chat. Unfortunately, it's a little too complicated for us to go back and pull all those contact information out of the chat.
Send me an email. Appreciate everybody's time here.
All right. Well, thank you, Albert. We are right at time. We appreciate everybody's input and feedback and the questions. So thanks for being with us. If you have additional questions, again, Albert's email is on the screen. You can email Albert. You can email me, just responding to the Zoom reminder that went out this morning. We're glad to help guide you along through this process and guide you to those resources. So I hope this benefited you today. Again, thank you for being here with us, and we hope to see you on not next Tuesday because it's the week of Thanksgiving, but on the first week of December for our next boot camp. Until then, everybody have a great week. Everybody have a great Thanksgiving holiday, and we will see you soon. Bye.